Most especially today, I'm pleased for him to share a few minutes with us as we honor veterans. President Haas is a 1973 honors graduate of the U.S. Coast Guard Academy. He is a retired captain with 23 years of commissioned service in the U.S. Coast Guard. Please join me in welcoming President Haas.
Thank you, Dean. Can you hear me all right if I'm out here a little bit back there? It's great to have you all here on this inaugural lecture. Bonnie, thank you for your continued leadership and inspiration to us all, and touching the future right here with our students, but also our colleagues as well. So thank you so much. We really do appreciate all the service that you're providing in your profession and how you're sharing so many others. And Captain Osborne, great to have you here as well. Thank you. Look forward to listening to your remarks too. I want to first off, as the Dean pointed out, we did celebrate this week Veterans Day. I think we've been celebrating it all week long, which is great. Monday was the 11th, of course. For those that have served in any of the branches of service, could you please stand and be recognized, please? I'm very proud to have served in the Coast Guard, and also very proud because my three children are currently either an active duty or reserve status as well, my two sons and my daughter. And also going back to my dad, who was a cook. He was a third-class petty officer on a destroyer in the Pacific Theater during World War II. And he says his job was morale. That's pretty accurate, I think. And then my father-in-law was a survivor of the Battle of Bulge in World War II, so we have that DNA. But really, this week has been a wonderful celebration of our veterans who have served and those who will continue to serve as well into the future. On Monday, we dedicated a new Veterans Lounge over in Allendale, which was great to follow the leaders of some of our students who are alums. In fact, 10 years ago today, we had about 50 students who were veterans. Now we have close to 600. And we're a veteran-friendly institution as defined by national standards, which I'm very, very proud of. We also announced that same morning on Monday that Grand Valley will now offer in-state tuition for all veterans, regardless of what state they come from. If they want to come here to Grand Valley, we will help them with some of the financials that are necessary. And then my proudest moment actually this week came when I was asked to be on a panel for Governor Snyder, and he was, and this was the third of 3 summits he has held over this year. I was called to help with the Education Summit. We went to the Talent Summit, connecting with jobs and careers, and this one was on veterans. But the moment came really when one of our own, Julia Trent, one of our nursing students, stood up. She was Gorman, and she is a Laker for a lifetime, without a doubt. And she so well represented herself and the nursing profession and the future of the nursing profession and all of us here at Grand Valley State University with her words and demeanor and what she was demonstrating to all of those employers in the audience. And there was over 100 vets that were nominated to stand up and share their story. And 5 of them were chosen, and she was one of them. And that, to me, was the proudest part of my week, to hear one of our students representing us so well. And I know that we have students right here with us for this lectureship that will continue their professions too and distinguish themselves in the professions that we are offering here at Grand Valley State University. Nursing is one of those, of course, that is so critical as we look ahead in terms of what I call team health. So I'm so glad that we can start this inaugural lectureship with a focus on veterans, with an expert in the field. And from this, I hope we can take away greater appreciation for our veterans, to be sure, but also the profession of nursing as well. So thank you all for coming, and we'll get started. Thanks, Dean.
Thank you, President Haas. There's no better way to start. We appreciate it. I just want to do a few introductions before we move on with our program. First of all, I want to tell you that the Wesorick Center for Healthcare Transformation was launched in the Kirchhoff College of Nursing in 2009. And in 2012, we were able to hire our first executive director, which is Dr. Evelyn Klingerman. And she has brought intentionality to the work, understands the vision of what we hoped for the center, and is making it a reality using her scholarly leadership. She's engaging faculty and students, community partners, interdisciplinary teams, and creating new partnerships. And as you can imagine, with her deep commitment to her work and her interprofessional spirit, she is committed to a large interprofessional conference up in northern Michigan today. So very regretfully, she's not here. It was very torn. But trust me, she's representing the work of the Wesorick Center very well at the conference that she's at. I also want to recognize Dr. Yvette Petty. And Dr. Petty, would you stand up? She is our new dean for the graduate programs in the College of Nursing, and she joined us in July. She is very special to what we're doing here today because of her personal commitment to the veterans. She has worked in the Veterans Administration system for a number of years and comes to us with a strong sense of practice and a strong sense of commitment for the work that we need to do to ensure that all veterans have quality and equity in their care. She's nationally known personally for her commitment to women veterans, with particularly a focus on women who have endured sexual trauma during service. She is helping us within the College of Nursing to develop more deeply a veteran-centric curriculum. She is also continuing to serve at the Veterans Administration facility in the Battle Creek area 1 day a week, so keeping her strong practice foothold. And the beauty of her appointment and the work that we're doing in education is she's helping us understand the reality between practice and education and how those two areas of expertise must meet in order to do the best job that we can. So thank you, Dr. Petty. I also want to recognize Stephen Lipnicki. Are you still here? Can you stand up? Did you leave? I just want to recognize him. He is the Assistant Dean for Students for Grand Valley State University, and his particular area of oversight is with the adult learners who return to school and graduate students, and particularly he is committed to helping our veteran students, which he told me over lunch, we have over 500 now at Grand Valley, helping them to be successful and to meet their needs during their educational journey. He's been very critical to helping us put this program together today and has helped us with many of the details. So if you see Stephen before the day's over, please thank him because it's been an enormous contribution for us. One other bit of homework, there is a sign-in sheet for those of you that would like to get continuing education units, and it's out in the foyer, and there's an evaluation form that you'll need to complete in order to get that credit. And then finally, I want to thank the individuals that are part of our team in the College of Nursing that helped make it possible for us to have this event here today. And I want to recognize Kelly Knight and Carrie Smucker, who both work with us in the College of Nursing. And then I want to recognize the graduate assistants that work in the Wesorick Center in the College of Nursing. And that's Maria McCormick, and Carly Roach. So thank you both very much for helping us pull this together. And now I want to take a few minutes to tell you a little bit about Bonnie Wesorick. Many of you know her well, you know of her work well, but I think there's a good number of you who may not. And because this is the Wesorick Distinguished Lecture, you have to know why it's distinguished. And it's just such an honor for me to get to say these words about Bonnie. Her professional career has evolved from being a staff nurse at Butterworth Hospital to being an instructor for the Butterworth Hospital School of Nursing, to positions within Grand Valley and the Kirchhoff College of Nursing as a clinical faculty and research associate. It was during those early years of her career that the seed for her passion for the synthesis of knowledge and practice was planted, and it has flourished ever since. She returned to Butterworth Hospital as the Director of Professional Nursing Practice, and her work there evolved in what has become her legacy work. Bonnie Wesorick is the founder and Chairman Emeritus of the Clinical Practice Model Resource Center and founder of the CPMRC International Consortium. Her mission is to co-create and sustain the best places to practice and the best places to receive care. Over the last 2 decades, she has partnered with thousands of interdisciplinary practitioners from rural, community, and university settings, working to create healthy, healing practice cultures and a patient-centered, integrated healthcare system. Her leadership in the development and implementation of an interdisciplinary professional practice framework with evidence-based tools and resources has literally revolutionized practice and automation. She has shared her expertise and learned from the expertise of others from over 1,000 diverse clinical settings and professional organizations, both within and beyond the healthcare arena. She is an internationally known speaker, storyteller, author, and healthcare futurist who has written many books, articles, videos, CDs, and DVDs. She is often a keynote or featured speaker at local, state, national, and international conferences. On the CPM website, it states, Bonnie connects with the hearts and minds of others and brings a sense of direction and hope in the midst of chaos in today's healthcare arena. This is the connection that made Bonnie and I the friends and colleagues that we are. She connects to my vision, my thinking, and my heart. I can say without a doubt that I'm truly blessed to have her as a partner and to have the opportunity to work with her and to have the center in our College of Nursing that honors the legacy of her work. And it's been very natural that she would be the one to introduce the first distinguished lecture that honors the Wesorick Center. Bonnie, will you please come up?
Thank you, Cynthia. That's actually quite a humbling situation to have someone introduce you like that. It really is. Today is a very important day because it is our first distinguished speaker. I mean, this is so exciting. And when I reflect on it, you know what I thought about? I love so many of the things Winston Churchill said. There's one thing that always stuck with me, and it has come in handy to remember this quote, because he's described in this quote where we are today. And he says, this is not the end. This isn't even the beginning of the end. But it is perhaps the end of the beginning. And that is where we are right now, with a very young center. Our center's young. And we have an unbelievable journey ahead of us to serve so many of your colleagues and the people every day that we are privileged to care for. And so I thought to myself, what a perfect person to have and come and be our first distinguished lecturer. And the reason I say that is because, you know, in order to introduce somebody, you have to read all this, okay? And this is her resume, see? And I thought, well, golly, what struck me as I was reading through this is that she's actually a role model for the mission and vision of the center. You see, our goal is to be engaged in scholarly work, research that does what? And in the end, matters at the point of care. And when I say point of care, you know what I mean? Where the hands of those who give and receive care meet. That is really what we're in the beginning process, the beginning journey of doing. And when I was reading through this resume, I thought, this is just perfect. Because you see, our speaker started out, like all of us in this room, made a decision at some point in our life to be healers for this humanity. And some people are engaged every day with hands on, and some don't even see the patients. But every one of us markedly influence the quality of their care. And she made a decision to serve. Went from high school into college on a, by the way, full ride scholarship. So we're talking about a bright person here today, you know. Full ride scholarship, only to be doubled by another scholarship from the Navy later. But anyway, that's how she started her journey. And I asked her, how is it that you decided to join the military? And remember, our focus is point of care. She said when she got thinking about serving, and I might add, the sailors and their families at the point of care. That's what brought her into the military, wanting to do that. And it's been a real fast track since she's joined. She rapidly moved to be one of the youngest nurse anesthetists at Georgetown from the Navy. The Navy, that's where she went into her specialty. And so she was one of the younger ones to do that. So she's got multi-years experience in a field that we know the importance of, right? And they sent her, Navy sent her to Georgetown to get her master's as a nurse anesthetist. And you know, in that role is where she learned to serve our military. It is during that period of time after that she went to Afghanistan, she went to Iraq, she went to Kuwait, she went to Iceland, Lithuania, and you know, had left her home to serve those in different places. So that is where she really has impacted as still an active, very active member in our military. And I suspect that we will learn something from her today that the rest of us who have not served will be enlightened by. So I'm really glad that you're here. And then, interesting, this is sort of interesting. Her major focus and her passion sits with education. And this room is filled with students. She's committed. She has served and taught and a preceptor and mentor and faculty for nurse anesthetists. She had made a commitment to really advance nursing and to advance nursing within our future colleagues. And that's really what the center is about, you know? So I really saw this in her life being perfect to be with us today. And she said that, and you can see it as you read through these pages, that education was where she wanted to be. Now, on the side, her mom, her family are educators, she told me, they're teachers. And she thinks, out of a little rebellion, she said she wasn't going to be a teacher, she's going to be a nurse. Now, guess what? She is teaching pretty much consistently and is calling her mom to get advice on how to really help those, you know, and help the learner. And so she also then went back to get her PhD from Rush, and then she's a doctor of philosophy, and how important that is in having us all remain very human. And so she's been teaching and doing research. She loved to do research, and guess where her research has been focused? At the point of care. What is the impact of that anesthesia on the lives of these young folks who have given so much to us? And she has focused on that, and pain and stress management. And if you read her research papers, they are focused in on what's happening at the point of care in those particular areas. She guides others and mentors them in development of their research as well. And she's now an associate professor at the Uniformed Services University of Health Science, and that's in Maryland. And is continuing to educate every day there. So as you can see, oh, and she, by the way, on the side, she has received 7 commendation medals for her clinical scholarly and her research work. And I think that you can see why she is the first person to be the distinguished lecturer for the Wesorick Center. But I think the things that are most important, she will just bring to you when she speaks with you. So I'd like to introduce you, Dr. Osborne, Captain. What comes first, Doctor, Captain? I've been meaning to ask that, forgot to ask. So, welcome and help me welcome her.
Good afternoon. It is an absolute pleasure to be here for this. I've had a wonderful day with the faculty here, but now I sort of feel like I don't know what to say because they have so many innovative things going on here. The students, you are so fortunate because a lot of the things I'm going to talk to you about, the faculty are going to say, we're already doing that. So what a cool thing. I had to go through a number of different clearances and everything to come do any presentation. That's what we do in the military. And it got to be sort of funny that every single person I talked to about coming here said the same thing. Oh my God, you're gonna freeze. I think Michigan gets kind of a bad rap because it's not that cold here. It is not that balmy in Washington, D.C. right now either. So here I am on my scarf because I was terrified of freezing. But anyway, so thank you for bringing decent weather for me. I appreciate that. It just occurred to me that before I get started, I'd like to tell you a quick story because I was honored to be promoted to captain fairly recently, and I couldn't really decide what I wanted to do because it's a big jump in the Navy to go to that rank, and I wanted to do something very special. And I could have done something at the Uniformed Services University, and it would have packed the auditorium because the students would have all felt like they had to go, and that would have been kind of cool, I guess. But I decided that what I really wanted to do was do it down at the Marine Corps Memorial. That's the Iwo Jima one. I don't know if you've ever seen pictures of that. I've been there. It's a very powerful place, though. And I thought, well, the downside of that is that it's going to be fairly small because you're not going to get people to drag down there on a Saturday. And but I thought that's okay because it's really for me. And in the ceremony in the Navy, you wear a particular uniform where you have these shoulder boards. And you go through the whole ceremony and then you swap out to the new rank of the shoulder board. So your family typically does that and it's really special. And so there was a handful of people there. I'm like, oh, that's okay. We get ready to start. And then these 3 giant buses, I'm not sure what those buses are called, but these veterans, there's this group that brings in all of these veterans for this tour of the monuments. And I hit the exact time of one of those. And here they come. We had a parade of wheelchairs. You just wouldn't believe it. These were World War II vets, mostly. And so if you do the math, these are not spring chickens by any stretch. So that's why they're all in a wheelchair. Well, they were thrilled to be part of the ceremony because they actually really understand what all that means. And it was the most powerful, incredible experience. I am so thrilled. That's definitely one of the finest moments I've had. But there was a man there that fought at Iwo Jima, and the tears, and there was a little army nurse from World War II in her little tiny hand. It was just incredible. I will never ever forget it. So it was a very cool moment for me as a veteran to be able to spend that time with them. So let me see if I can work the equipment here. I'm going to spend a fair bit of time telling you about myself, and I hope that you don't misunderstand me because this is not meant to be narcissistic, but I have been heavily influenced by the late Senator Inouye. I got to meet him on numerous occasions. He was such an incredible champion of both military and nursing. and it was a real honor to know him. And I have this admiration for him because he was just an incredible communicator. And you could get groups that didn't even agree talking. We need him in Washington right now, you know? But I remember one of the things he said to me, and I will never forget it, is he said, you know what, Lisa, it's one thing to know what someone thinks, but it is a far greater thing to understand why they think that. And that has stuck with me because he was born and raised in Hawaii. And in Hawaii, it's a very big part of our culture to be storytellers. And so you couldn't just tell him something because he wanted to hear the backstory. And so that has really affected how I teach. It affects a lot of things because I feel like the best way to communicate is to find something that people can grab onto. If you give a PowerPoint and it has those stupid little bullets, people just kind of glaze on you. And so I think it's a very powerful thing. And so I do want you to understand where I'm coming from, because I'm going to say some things that might be a little bit controversial to you, and they might be aggravating to you, but I think there are some things, especially in nursing, that we have got to just call out the elephant in the room, because there's a lot of things that people are very fearful of saying, and so I don't want to go there without having you understand who I am. So I'm from the Uniformed Services University, which a lot of people have never heard of. And that's because we don't do a good enough job with name branding and all of that. We are a graduate school of nursing, so we don't have any undergraduate programs there. And we are also a big medical school. We just had our big 20th anniversary celebration, which was fantastic. And we also named our graduate school of nursing after Senator Anna Wade. So it was a lovely celebration. And we sit on the same campus as this huge military medical center. It used to be the Bethesda Naval Medical Center. And with the base realignment and closure, they decided that it would be wise to take this giant Walter Reed Army Medical Center and just do a bunch of construction and plunk all these Army folks into the Bethesda Naval Medical Center. It was a fiasco. Oh my goodness. We have lots of inter-service rivalry, and some of it's in fun and some of it's sort of not so much, but we try to work together. So we are very much a joint command now, and now it's called the, what is it? Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. And so it's not the old Walter Reed, it's the new Walter Reed, we call it. But it's a huge base now. And so we have this huge medical center, and then we have a lot of wounded warrior programs and what they call the Intrepid Center. All this is all in one base. And then across the street is NIH. So I want you to picture coming to and from work. With two major medical centers and a university, all trying to get out on Wisconsin Avenue, which is not really that big of a road. So when people ask me, you know, I've been deployed to all these areas, and people often ask me if I have PTSD. And I say, you bet. But it's from DC traffic. It's not really from war at all. But the reason why I'm telling you all this is that you have to picture what it's like coming in to work every day, because that's actually one of the harder parts of the day. And I want to just kind of show you here. This is how you come into our parking garage. Now you've driven, like this is on the back side of the campus, so you have to drive through the whole campus to get there. And it's pretty much a daily occurrence where you get stopped at, where you have to stop at the crosswalk, because a wounded warrior is crossing the street, navigating their new prosthetic legs. And it's touching, really. And so you see that coming in, and you sit in the traffic, and I don't know when they took this picture, but normally there would be all this traffic trying, as you're sneaking up to the parking garage. And if you kind of zoom in, you'll see right over top of the parking garage structure is our motto of the school, which is learning to care for those in harm's way. And I think it's interesting because every hospital and university has a mission statement, they're required to. And yet, what's really interesting is that this is just a shortened version of what our mission statement is. And I guarantee you, if you ask any faculty member or student, hey, what's the motto or what's the mission here? They can tell you in a second. What's interesting is if you go to other universities and other medical centers, the people that know what the mission is exactly are the ones that they're just getting ready for accreditation and they're like, crap, what's our mission? So this is a huge deal, though, because we are sort of crazy, passionate people there. But we take our mission very seriously. And this really inspires me daily because when I was in Afghanistan, I will tell you, that is the most difficult anesthesia I have ever or will ever do. Because those are incredibly wounded people right off the field. And so it was really remarkable to me when we had partially a new crew coming in, and I looked up and there was one of my former students checking in as staff. And when I mean former student, I'm talking 6 months ago he graduated. And I will tell you that that is incredible how confident and how competent he was. My chest just swelled out in pride that we are able to create that. And we create that because we have a faculty that believes so strongly in that particular mission. And so my sort of culture, I think that is the one thing that the military does well, is we tend to be very mission focused. And I think it's easy for other areas to not be so much. So one last little couple of blurbs about me. I do want you to realize that I am an educator now, but I am still actively practicing. This goofy picture of me, that's actually a selfie, isn't it cheesy? I took this picture because somebody didn't believe that the gowns that we wear, the lead gowns, because they were shooting x-rays in the operating room, is actually camouflage. They didn't believe me. So anyway, so I do believe in everyone maintaining their clinical practice. I think it's very easy to get confused and separated. Some of the Navy leaders that I work with, I tell you what, I just came from a strategic planning meeting and I just wanted to pluck my eye out because some of the things that people are saying, they're saying that because they haven't touched a patient in 10 years. It's so easy to get disconnected. And so that is certainly one of my advices. I'm trying to be honest up front here. So I do have a clinical practice. The other thing is I've done every single kind of job, if you want to say, the large academic medical center, the goofy little, I couldn't find my picture of the Naval Hospital, Keflavik, Big Iceland, but this very small overseas duty station where I was it. Because the anesthesiologist that was also stationed up there loved to go up to a place called Actuary, which is weird. It's way up it's actually within the Arctic Circle. And yet that's where some of the better weather and the more beautiful areas are. But if I needed help, he was 8 hours away because they don't have very good roads there. So I understand what it means to be a fully independent practitioner. We had labor and delivery. I had a situation where I was right in the middle of doing a shoulder case and we had a true blue crash C-section. And I'm thinking, okay, that's going to be interesting. So I've dealt with all of those types of issues. I've also worked in a large academic medical center. I worked very closely with lots of anesthesiologist colleagues. So I want you to know that I've seen that whole spectrum. And, I also put this in, have you ever heard of Flat Stanley? Some of you? Well, that's me in an up-armored vehicle in Afghanistan, and I have Flat Stanley, which the kids send those over, and you're supposed to write stories about where in the world or whatever Flat Stanley has been. So that Flat Stanley story was pretty good, because we were all over Afghanistan, so that's pretty cool. Okay, so enough about me. Now you know who I am. When you do military presentations, especially for more senior officers, you're required to do what's called a bluff. And because we love acronyms. And BLUF stands for bottom line up front. Because the higher ranking folks, honestly, their attention span is really kind of pitiful. So if you don't start out a presentation saying, okay, by the way, here's what we're gonna get to, you can't keep their attention. It doesn't matter what you do. So the bluff slide here is that coming to talk with you, I really wanted to sort of describe my concerns, and that is that we have a nasty sort of storm right now of the fact that healthcare has unfortunately become something of a political football. We have ever increasing complexity of care. It takes a lot of understanding of all kinds of technology and all of this. And then we have an aging population, aging nurses, as well as the people we're taking care of. And so all of that ends up creating a situation of sort of a looming nursing shortage. And so all of that taken together, when you're trying to be a nursing educator, and when you're trying to be a leader and discuss things like scope of practice, man, that's tough when you put all that in the same soup. So this is kind of what I want to talk a little bit about today. I'm going to give you sort of my take on things. And I actually really like our dress blue uniform, which those young men, Chief and JG back there are wearing. I'm not wearing that today on purpose, because if I stand up here and I have all those navy stripes on, I think it's difficult for you to separate the fact that this talk today is not from the Department of the Navy. This is Lisa Osborne. So if you disagree with me, don't blame the Navy, it's just me speaking, okay? Let's see if I can manage this video here. I'm going to apologize to you up front though, because this video is slightly longer than I would prefer to play in a presentation such as this. But when I tried to find ways to cut it down, I felt like something was sort of missing. And so I want to sort of start out with this, and so I apologize for the length of it. And I hope the sound of it. apologize if some of you have seen it, but I think it's an incredibly powerful video, and I wish I could have found something similar that was related to veteran care, because honestly, that might look a little bit different if you could put the thoughts of the veteran in there. As far as I know, we don't have something like that. But I showed this to our graduate students, and it's kind of interesting. I said, so what do you think that's about? And they all said it's about nursing. Actually, it's a video about empathy and the human connection to patients, of which is often involving a nurse, sure. But that video is actually not about nursing. And so part of the reason why I want to show that today is that I think it's important that we realize that when you're talking about taking care of a patient, I'm going to use Yvette's words, I remember she said this all the time, it takes a village. We are part of a healthcare team because when you have people that are trying to overstretch so far because you're trying to be all of those things in the video, and honestly, I feel like that's sort of the Achilles heel in nursing, is that nurses watch this video and they want to be the person pushing the guy in the wheelchair, and they want to be the person with the dog, and they want to be the, if you really identify who the nurses are in that video, there are a few, yes, but I just think it's interesting that when you show that to a group of nursing students, and I knew there would be some nursing students today, I do want you to realize that it's not just you, this whole burden is not on your shoulders. So if we're going to talk, I want to talk about nursing today, and I really like talking about nursing education, but one of the things that creates most of our faculty battles, where I work, is just the argument about what nursing is in the first place. How on earth can you design a curriculum or fight about scope of practice if you can't agree on what is nursing in the first place? I remember these discussions when I was a brand new nurse 23 years ago. And it's amazing to me that we're sort of still there. So I want to spend a little time talking about that. Because nurses are a huge group. I decided I would actually kind of look it up and see how many nurses there are, and it kind of depends on where you look, I guess, but roughly 2.6 million nurses. That's the largest group of healthcare professionals. That's kind of cool. And not only is that cool, but we also spend the most time in terms of hands-on with the patients. And so the things that nurses do often really do touch patients' lives. We get to see patients at the most vulnerable time. But the question I would ask this group, though, is that if nurses are the largest group, who is it that nurses are often not in the conversations when we're talking about the healthcare mess that we have right now? It's an interesting thing when you start talking about designing curriculum. So when you think about, okay, let's just do what we call a SWOT analysis. We do this in the military. It's not SWOT as in Spain, it's SWOT, which has to do with the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And it's the way we approach analyzing all kinds of things. If you do that for nursing, it's kind of interesting because one of the glaring weaknesses comes out, and it's always the elephant in the room. That we have all these entry points into nursing. We have diploma nurses, we have associate degree nurses, we have BSN nurses, and we have all the way up to a DMP, and we even have PhDs in nursing. Except what we call them all. Nurse. How is that not confusing to the public? We've been talking about this for a very long time, but it ends up being kind of a political mess. Partially because we have a nursing shortage. And so we statement that, well, what you need to do is you need to get rid of this bottom end, and we just need to have whatever. But then the problem is when you have a big nursing shortage, it becomes a little bit tricky to figure out how to do that. And so therein sort of lies the problem. One of the things that's kind of interesting, when I first came in to the military, the Navy had already decided that you couldn't come in as an ensign nurse unless you were a BSN grad. Okay, so I come in. But then what was weird is I show up in San Diego as my first duty station. I was a PEDS nurse. And the other nurses that were on the ward with me, a lot of times, were what was called a warrant officer. Warrant officers are weird in the military, honestly, because everybody's always kind of confused about what they are. And so let me just, please don't glaze over, I'll be fast. What a warrant officer means is that somebody has come up through the enlisted ranks and they have some kind of technical skill that is so valuable that we want to keep them around specifically for that knowledge. And so if you think about some knowledge of a particular engine or something like that, it's valuable to have that person around. Now, it was never the intention for that person to continue on some kind of promotion path, though. They were kind of in this holding pattern. Now, they have a couple of warrant officer ranks, but it wasn't about promoting up to the other officer ranks. They were going to stay there because they were valued for that technical skill, period. So these not advanced, what am I trying to say, associate degree nurses weren't allowed to come in as an ensign, so they made them warrant officers. And they were the most unhappy group of people I've ever met in my life because they weren't in a group that was going to go anywhere. Because warrants don't go anywhere. That's not the point of a warrant officer. And some of them were fairly experienced nurses. Here comes Ensign Lisa. I had to be in charge. I'm just graduated. Do you really think they were motivated to help make me successful? Absolutely not. And so I don't know for a fact, these guys may know how long that lasted, but it didn't last long because it was a disaster. So one of the things I would suggest to you is that I'm telling you that story because I think that's probably true in the civilian setting, that some of those folks feel the same way, who are associate degree nurses or diploma nurses, that it's kind of a rank problem. And I think we need to address it. I think these programs that are helping people to use that as a bridge to the BSN are phenomenal. Some places are doing that beautifully. The thing that challenges us as educators, though, is that you have to understand that these people are adult learners. They have lots of stuff going on in their lives, and when we think about how we're going to educate them, we have to take that into consideration. Clinical degrees can be challenging to do well from a distance. And so we have some real challenges on how to make that happen as well. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about one of the programs that we have going on. But we recently had a lot of disagreement in one of our strategic planning meetings about utilization of people. Now this is utilization of nurses in all kinds of flavors, because what happens for us is that we call them billets, but you would probably call them a job that you can hire into. That is not what utilization means. Utilization means what you're actually going to do with that person once they're in that position. One of the sort of side jobs that I have for the Navy is that I am what's called the specialty leader for Navy nursing research. And so I'm in charge of all the Navy nursing PhDs. And what drives me absolutely crazy is I have a billet somewhere and I put somebody that's a PhD prepared nurse into that job, and then the senior nurse executive utilizes them for all kinds of things. They're getting ready for joint commission, or we have an interesting term in the military that is SLJO, which is Special Jobs Officer. it's a marine term, and the S actually stands for something that's really not meant for this forum, but we'll say special instead. Special little jobs officer, which means you do all these random things. How frustrating is that this person has a PhD, for crying out loud, and we can't utilize them as a nurse researcher? And I think that that's what's interesting, is there's nurses that get utilized for all kinds of goofy things. And part of it is our own fault. Because I just showed you a video, and nurses all say, I want to do all of those things. And I think part of it is that from the time that we were brought up that if it wasn't diagnosing something, all the things that the physician was involved in, everything after that was nursing. That's not true. There are all kinds of things that are not in our lane. And nurses are notorious for getting out of their lane. If it's a social work thing, let the social worker do it. If it's a psychology thing that's not quite in your area of expertise, well, let's get somebody in that is their area of expertise. And so, one thing I want to say to the nursing students in here is please make sure you understand certain things are simply out of your lane. It's not useful for you, because anything that keeps you from doing what you're supposed to be doing for the patient needs to be reevaluated. And we have to get better at saying, that's not my job. We have a nurse that was so inspiring. She was a recovery room nurse. And she had this issue because all of these different people that worked for her came in at kind of a different time than a lot of people. They came in at like 9 or 10 because patients weren't coming out of the recovery or out of the operating room to be recovered first thing in the morning. They had to have their surgery first. And so the problem in San Diego was that there wasn't any parking. And so those nurses kept coming in at 6 when everybody else was coming in just to get a parking spot. Well, the civilian people that she had were getting tired of not getting paid for some of this time, and so they were starting to request payment. Well, it wasn't in the budget for them to get paid for that, and so finally she got so tired of the whole problem that she said, you know what, let's come to an agreement. What's a reasonable time for you to come to work? They agreed on, 45 minutes. And she said, I don't care. Drive around until you find a parking spot. If you're late for work, you're late for work. Well, they were late for work because there wasn't anywhere to park. And so the interesting thing is, when you have that situation, then you have people that are finished with their surgery and they call out telling them they're going to come to PACU. Well, they couldn't because there wasn't a nurse to take care of them. So there's nothing to do but stay in the operating room and begin the recovery phase there with the anesthesia provider. That's the only thing you can do. Well, let me just tell you, after about a day of that, the hospital administration figured it out. And to this day, they have some agreement with the city where people park up by Balboa Park. So guess what? She said, I don't have the resources to fix the parking problem at this place. I can only fix what's in my lane, and these people cannot be coming in at 6 in the morning for a 10 o'clock shift. So it's an interesting example of someone digging their heels in, and I'm not recommending that you be obnoxious necessarily, but what I'm saying is that you do have to realize that there are other people that can definitively fix the problem, but if you continue to put a Band-Aid on it, and stretch and stretch and stretch and kill yourself in it, we can't fix the problem. We have people, a person here that's all about systems. I want to hug her because these systems problems, those things that are driving you nuts every day, are unacceptable. That's the kind of stuff that we're trying to teach you to bring forward. We're not expecting you to solve it though, because sometimes you are not the person to solve it. You may not have the resources to solve it. Let's get it fixed instead of just griping about it over your lunch break. Let's get it fixed. The other thing we argue about all the time is what is it that needs to be in our curriculum or not. I'm going to give you my bias up front again, that I ended up being the physiology instructor for the graduate school of nursing because that's my passion. The foundation of everything we do is science. We we are the Uniformed Services University of the Health Sciences. If you do a poor job of teaching people science, they never go on to be good at patient care because you don't understand what's happening. You don't understand pharmacology. All of that stems from physiology. I had a student recently that came by my office and she's just finishing up as an FNP, and she said, "Oh my God, it's all about physiology." I was like, "That's what I'm trying to tell you." So I feel passionate that you cannot ignore the sciences. If you're going to pay attention to any courses, students, pay attention to that. I'm shocked at times when we have students that are coming in to my physiology course. I have all kinds of people. I have FNP, Psych NP, all these folks all in the same room. And they're coming from programs, but they have their BSN from all over the place. And I'm amazed at the problem that I have with the fact that people are at such different baselines. Some people come in with good science preparation. Some people, oh my goodness. And yet I have them all in the same group, and I have to figure out how to manage that. And I think that that's true even in BSN programs, that people are coming in with better preparation or not. And so then as educators, we have to figure out how do you adjust to that. And I still sort of struggle with that. Well, one of the ways that I do that is realize that you have to meet the people where they are. And then we end up with all kinds of special sessions, and I also have to realize I can't necessarily get those people as far as I would like to in a single semester. And so we have chosen to do a very integrated curriculum. And so then that's my other bias, is that if you don't integrate curriculum, you're going to lose those people. And so they have physiology and anatomy their first semester with us, and so it's a tough summer. But we make sure that what's going on in the anatomy course, which is a real anatomy course, we have 16 cadavers for about 70 students. And they do dissections and they do the full drill. But I'm working very closely with their anatomy instructors so that we can integrate the curriculum so they're learning structure, function. So you're sort of studying the same part. And we also teach in a very conceptual way, because if you just teach respiratory, cardiac, then students don't understand how those things work together. But we realize that's still not going to get there. And then by fall, if you're going to get into your specialty courses, if you're an anesthesia student and you're going to get a lecture on the uptake and distribution of inhalational anesthetics, we're going to start the lecture with a review of respiratory physiology so that they get it again and again and again. Because there are certain things you cannot expect people are not encyclopedias. You can't just know all of it magically with one shot, especially things that are incredibly complex. And so they get it again. And then in pharmacology, before we start the lecture on cardiac drugs, guess what? We do a quick review of cardiac physiology again. So they get it over and over, and I really feel like it's amazing to watch how our scores have gone from a little bit pitiful in the physiology courses to pretty decent. So I'm very proud of that, and I think it's a demonstration of the fact that you have to have integrated curriculum for students to really learn. I mean, trying to learn things out of context is nearly impossible. And that is the one thing I think that nurses excel at, honestly, is that understanding the patient in the context is so critical. Because the patient may have different comorbidities, there may be things that you need to adjust, and I feel like that is the one thing that nurses actually do understand very well. Understanding that you can't just see a patient, write for a medication, knowing very well that that patient can't afford that medication. That prescription will never get filled. You have not done any good in that situation. You're going to have to go the extra mile to figure out what's going on with that patient. That patient just told you he lost his job last week. That's going to be a little more complex to figure out how to manage that, but you can't just go, I wrote for the inhaler that is the best evidence-based practice. Well, it's not going to work if he's not going to fill the prescription. And I think that's the kind of thing that we see. So it's important. So one of the things I think that is really challenging is when you go to try to add to curriculum, every single program already has a fairly packed curriculum, let's face it. And that's happened over time because the complexity of care has gotten so much more. So we have to, as educators, really consider, we can't just keep adding. We can't, well, because if you're not gonna add time to the program, then something has to go. Or something has to get integrated. That's the choice. And this is becoming brutally evident to us in some of the DEP curriculum because people just want to add and add and add. And the students are wiped out. There's only so much you can absorb at one time. And so it's really challenging us to just figure out a different way, a different modality. And I think it's really sort of interesting how much our students love some of these YouTube videos. Because they're like 10 minutes and it's just, you know, cellular respiration. And they have all, for the visual learner, it's phenomenal. But that's how a lot of these students are learning. And so we have to figure out how to adjust to that. Because unfortunately, when you're talking about these adult students with kids and all this other stuff going on, to just read yet another long-winded version in a textbook, it just doesn't stick. Because half the time you're trying to learn that, they have the 3-year-old hanging off their leg. And so that's the reality most of the time. So we have to figure out how do we get the most bang for our buck out of it. So my other pet peeve is the clinical side of the house. It is true that clinical education is where the rubber meets the road. But the thing that really sort of stresses me out about it is that when you think about, we send all these students out for their clinical rotations, and we send students, we have all of our didactic time, and then we send students, they have to move their whole house and families. They move to Alaska, they move to San Diego, they move to Jacksonville, Florida, they're all over the place. So how do we keep our arms around the fact that they have to go out to a bunch of civilian hospitals to take care, to get particular kinds of cases? How can I ensure that every student is getting what they need out of that clinical rotation? How do I know that that clinical preceptor actually taught them anything? Because you can do the case together. But there's a huge difference. I teach a bunch of regional workshops for our national organization, and I'm always amazed because we have a huge group, and I'll think, okay, well, there won't be anybody next time. But I've done this for 7 years. That class is at the maximum every time. You know why? Because there are anesthesia programs that, for their regional anesthesia, man, are they fudging things. If they're gonna do a spinal, the anesthesiologist does all of the steps, puts what's called an introducer in, which is a short needle, and then they tell the student, okay, do the spinal. It is physically impossible for that needle to go any direction but one way once it's entering through that needle. There is no way it could go any other direction. A 4-year-old could do that. That is not doing a spinal. But what their requirements are is that they have to do a certain number of spinals. They didn't say, oh, by the way, you have to do every step of it. But that's assumed. And so those people don't know how to do a spinal. This kind of stuff is happening. And so how you figure out how to ensure a quality clinical education is definitely a challenge for us. And one of the things that I would say is that finding ways to incentivize and bring the clinical preceptors closer to the university is absolutely key. Because it takes energy to teach. And you can have the student with you, but you may not be pending them, you may not be doing all of those things because you're just not in the mood. Or maybe you have your 5 questions that you ask the students. That's kind of your thing as a clinical preceptor. And that's the only thing you bring to the table. Well, for the anesthesia students, they're like, yeah, I'm working with so-and-so. I know I'm going to have to talk about supply and demand of the heart. But once they've done that once or twice, what's the use of doing that every time you work together? So it takes a huge amount of prep and energy for clinical preceptors. And so we have to find creative the way you were taught. And so we sort of hope that your education was similar, because it's going to flow forward. So I think that lack of bringing people in, talking about how do you evaluate someone in the clinical setting. I mean, that's a whole art to that. If I work with one of these students, what am I supposed to say about our day that's useful? She was so nice. Who cares? You know, I mean, that's not, when I'm trying to evaluate, should we pass this student or not? I don't care if she's nice. I want to know if she knows her stuff. Well, I mean, I care that she's empathetic. I don't mean that. But the truth is, though, especially when you have a student who is struggling, we need good feedback about what is it that's making you upset about that student's performance, because I can't figure out a plan for remediation until you can help me figure out what's wrong. Bonnie was telling me my mom is a special education teacher, and so I spend time with my mom sometimes saying, what are we going to do with this person? It's like they got a sudden attack of ADD or something, just not really able to focus and multitask. And she often has very good recommendations, but this is my whole point, though, is that when you need to reach out, perhaps to someone from another discipline to help you, it should be no holds barred. You should say, you know what, whatever it takes. Because there are some tricky people. We have to figure out how to help them. The other thing is that why do we not let students help educate students? I tell that to people and they get all spun up. They get like my bulldog thing at me. It's scary to think about that, because they're like, oh, there's legal ramifications, there's this, there's that. And you don't necessarily have to do that with patient care. That's stressful. But I think it's interesting, especially in simulation, to let the more senior students help out. Because what's interesting and the real value to that is that it helps students to see how are people being graded and help bring them along. We end up having to do that in the military because our more senior anesthesia students do all types of things. And sometimes it's things like, oh, be careful when you work with so-and-so, they're gonna this, you know, so there's that kind of chummy mentoring. But then there's actually situations where they do have feedback about what a student's doing and all of that. And I see the real value is that that person is going to go on and be part of education themselves. And it's a chance for us to help teach them how people are learning. Because it's amazing how, if you just change someone's perspective sometimes, it's like the whole world sort of like looks differently. So that is definitely a recommendation that I have. The other thing that I get to do at the Uniformed Services University is it's kind of weird being right there in the heart with everything going on in Washington. And Senator Inouye's former chief of staff is De Leon. He is a firecracker. I just love that man. So when he retired, he decided that, well, actually his wife decided that he needed to find something else to do. He was driving her nuts at home. And so he decided, he works part-time at the Uniformed Services University. And he's a fascinating guy because he's a clinical psychologist by trade. And was a former president of the American Psychological Association. So he's been in very powerful positions for many, many years. And it just drives him nuts how there's such a lack of nursing voice in so many of the issues. He tells me stories about trying to drag nurses in and get them involved. And I think part of it is that nurses just don't feel comfortable with what's going on in legislative processes. It's a little bit easier for us because we live in DC, we can run down and watch different things going on in the Hill. But I do find that that's a little bit distressing because as I've spent more time in that environment, I've seen how things happen. And sometimes this huge things get decided over a cup of coffee. huge fan of science as well. One of the things she was most known for is at Columbia University, when she taught there, she brought all the nursing textbooks down in the courtyard and burned them. Got in huge trouble for it too. But she did that because she said there's no science in them, there's no point in these textbooks. And so she has always been a big fan of that as well. She's unfortunately in her 90s now, but it's amazing to me though that it is important for people to realize that I think sometimes we feel sort of powerless as nurses, like there's no way that we're going to have any influence on certain things, but I am constantly amazed. In fact, I have to be very careful what I say to Pat, because the next thing you know, he's making phone calls. I'm like, wait, we were just talking, we're just kicking stuff around. But he's like one of those, it's time for show. If you make a decent argument to him, he's ready to go. So I think we have to find ways to make this more real to nurses, to understand that your voice matters. You can make a huge difference in how things are. And what makes me so bummed is that when some of these decisions that are so ridiculous get made, it's because the people that are making those have absolutely no healthcare background. Go look through a bunch of different senators and congressmen and look at their bios. They're not healthcare people. Because healthcare people don't want to deal with that icky stuff. Because we find the whole thing distasteful. And I agree, I don't like it either. But I don't like the outcome of someone else deciding either. So I would encourage you, get to know, lots of you have local senators, get to know who that person is. It's amazing how a quick conversation, if you ever have a chance to go to dinner and you have a chance to get one word in, if you have one word to say to the folks in Washington, what would it be? I sat next to this gal on the plane, and she was an OBGYN doing a fellowship, I think, in like reproductive medicine. Super sharp gal. It's amazing how younger the docs are getting. But the only thing that she said to me that was kind of upsetting is that I said something about something in the news or whatever. She goes, yeah, I don't watch the news. And so I asked her a few more questions, just trying to get an idea. She's choosing not to be informed at all. And yet, this is one very sharp, educated lady. And I wanted to get on my soapbox and talk about, it's an incredible right to be a voter. It's also a responsibility to be informed. I don't know what's happening with the complacency. I'm military, of course I'm all patriotic and I think highly of voting and all of that, but I don't understand what's wrong with the rest of the folks. That is your professional responsibility to understand what's happening in your profession. What's happening in the world. Are you really going to let other people just decide for you? I hope that you say, I think not. So how does the Affordable Care Act change the game a little bit? I got to hear a really interesting nurse who works for the Department of Health and Human Services talk recently. The Affordable Care Act, whether you believe in Obamacare, whether it's here to stay or whatever, I don't really care to discuss. But I do think that there are certain elements of the Affordable Care Act, because it's been around for a little while now, that there are certain things that probably have influence that are probably here to stay. And that is that there is going to be a move to primary care, preventative care, as we sort of grapple with these access issues. The truth is we know that prevention is